Welcome everyone, this is Nathan Lindorf with the Rational Independent. Last week's hiatus was due to the fact that we have 2 birthdays last week for my kids, and it was a very hectic week. We'll just leave it at that. But today we're back at it, and we've had some development in the news cycle since last we spoke. We have the chance to celebrate the momentous occasion of a president/former president formally indicted on federal criminal charges, which has never happened before. And it's interesting. We've been a republic for a long time. We don't often run into things that have never happened before, but here we are. So today we're covering an article in The Independent, and the headline is, Lindsay Graham ties himself in knots trying to defend Trump over classified documents indictment. And we're going to get into the details of the article, but before we get in too far, I want to go ahead and just kind of share the framing that I find to be the most useful. There's a social layer, a political layer, and a legal/criminal layer. And we often, if you're talking to someone who's tricky on this topic, really, or any topic, they're going to use your answer that's appropriate in one context and apply it to the wrong context in an effort to make you look foolish or get you flustered. And it looks like that's what happened. Congratulations, Stephanopoulos. So the particular context for today's article is an interview that Lindsay Graham did on ABC's show with George Stephanopoulos. In the interest of showing some of the hypocrisy and some of the challenges here, Stephanopoulos is seen as a mainstream media unbiased reporter. Going on his show is seen as basically saying, here, we're gonna cover things straight down the middle. We're going to do our best to just do straight news. Perhaps you're aware, perhaps you're not aware, Stephanopoulos worked for the Clintons. He came to prominence working for President Clinton during his administration. I wonder if he would have his current job without their patronage. I wonder if that means that might affect his coverage. Now, when it comes to this issue, what could the Clintons possibly have to do with this? Oh, yeah. Hillary Clinton had some misbehavior with some classified documents. So we'll get into that here in a minute. What I'm trying to draw out is it's very, very easy to have a bias. Some people's bias is obvious. Some people's bias is less obvious. Some people are willing to admit they have bias. Some people are not. But everybody's got them because we're human beings. There isn't a single reporter, politician, or commentator who doesn't fit that category. Yet. We'll see what ChatGPT has to say about it. But for now, we are all human beings. That means we all have bias. So we are imperfect tools. With the idea that there is that bias, let's take a look at this article. Senator Lindsey Graham was on ABC's This Week, where he received a grilling by host George Stephanopoulos about the allegations in the Justice Department's 37-count indictment unsealed this week. In one exchange, South Carolina senator blew up and demanded that he be allowed to finish his remark after Stephanopoulos, attempting to get him back on track, interrupted his spiel about Hillary Clinton and a private email server she used to store data during her time as Secretary of State in violation of federal rules. Here we see bias, here we see framing, and in a minute we'll get to the part where they switch around contexts of conversation. First, we frame this as Senator Lindsey Graham gives this half-hearted, meandering, off-track defense of Trump. Then when he doesn't get a chance to finish his kind of pre-programmed speech about how Trump is actually okay, his spiel, which is what that term means, then he blows up. So now you have someone who is distracted, who's off topic, who's giving some kind of programmed, Trump is awesome, he is wonderful, I am subsuming myself to him, spiel. And the host, the impartial host, tries to get him back on track. And now his guest has lost patience. And now his guest has lost his temper. He's blown up, frustrated that he didn't get a chance to get all the way through his spiel. And his spiel related to his spiel, as it's put here in this article, is related to Hillary Clinton and her use of a private email server to store data when she was Secretary of State in violation of the rules. So the news article is about a criminal indictment filed against President Trump. Hillary Clinton is brought up by Lindsay Graham as an example of an issue with the legal system where we're not seeing equal justice under the law, when different people of comparable situations, some get charged and some don't, and there seems to be a political bent between those prosecution decisions. That's a valid thing to bring up, in particular in the social and political space, which is where Lindsey Graham, and being on ABC's This Week, that's a political and social commentary show. They're having that conversation, and he's saying, listen, it's bad political precedent to have politically motivated prosecutions. I think it's also interesting the way they've very, very carefully phrased this. Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, stored data in violation of federal rules. Data is a nice broad topic. And yeah, she was in violation of federal rules. She was also in violation of federal law. But we don't want to say that, because then we have to ask the question of, if she violated federal law, why didn't she get indicted? Because she didn't, which is exactly Senator Graham's point. But they need to twist the presentation of this encounter in order to make it look like Senator Graham is way off base. If you read this and accept this framing, you're living in a warped version of reality. You're living in a bubble. This is not truth. This is someone's political spin. If I go on OAN or Fox News, I'm also going to get political spin. Everybody spins stuff. Everybody twists stuff. Everybody's human. It's just what we got to work with. So after blowing up at the host responds, "You didn't answer the question." Well, yeah, maybe I'm trying to answer the question from a Republican point of view. That may not be acceptable on this show, Mr. Graham complained in response. Thankfully, we then get an actual direct quote from Senator Graham once again, in an embedded tweet. Let's hear what he had to actually say, as opposed to someone's commentary about what he said. Most Republicans believe we live in a country where Hillary Clinton did similar things, and nothing happened to her. President Trump will have his day in court, but espionage charges are absolutely ridiculous. Now, to be fair, Lindsey Graham is wrong here. These are not espionage charges. No one is accusing President Trump of being a spy. What they are using is a statute called the Espionage Act. That's the title. It has to do with espionage-related activities, but the charges, the legislation does, but the charges that are being applied to President Trump, are related to document handling, not dispersal. No one's accusing him of having intimate relations with a Chinese spy. That would be Swalwell. But, we just brush that under the rug. We don't need to worry about that conversation. He would go on to argue that many Republicans, including apparently Mr. Graham himself, see the Justice Department as applying two different standards to Donald Trump and his Democratic rivals, like Joe Biden, who was found to have a small trove of classified documents dating back to his time as vice president at his home and office. Pause, and I'm going to insert here, as well as documents going back to his time as a senator. So yes, it's true, he had a trove of classified documents dating back to his time as vice president, but it's incomplete because he also had documents from when he was a senator. As well as Ms. Clinton, who was investigated by the FBI for her use of a private server. Okay, so she was at least investigated. That's something. Now we get the fact check. I love this portion. There are a few facts that undermine the assertion that Mr. Trump and his Democratic allies are or should be on the same playing field. For one, all indications point to the idea that Mr. Trump and his team delayed and fought federal authorities for months after the trove of documents was discovered, only yielding the bulk of them during an FBI raid. It's an interesting way to frame it, but we'll just put a pin in that for now. Secondly, as Secretary of State, Ms. Clinton's records would not fall under the authority of the Presidential Records Act. And thirdly, the FBI investigated Ms. Clinton for months in a politically damaging probe that is widely thought to have contributed to her defeat to Donald Trump in 2016, even if it did not eventually lead to criminal charges. And here we have the switch. Ms. Clinton suffered a political consequence. Therefore, she should be under no legal jeopardy. That's not how any of this works. Not if you want to have a society that believes in the rule of law. If you want to blow up the rule of law, then you're on the right track. They make 3 assertions here, and they call them facts. These are adorable facts. Let's talk about it. Mr. Trump and his team delayed and fought federal authorities for months after the trove of documents was discovered, only yielding the bulk of them after an FBI raid. Yeah, so the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago in order to take these documents. That's never happened before. However, presidents often end up with classified documents, or formerly classified documents, however you want to look at it, after their administration. And sometimes there's some legal wrangling back and forth. I don't know if you've ever been involved in a lawsuit. Lawsuits are adversarial by nature. If you're dealing with a regulatory body who's trying to lawyer negotiate something, it takes forever. I mean, lawyers got to get paid. They get hungry. Anytime you're dealing with lawyer negotiation, things drag on. I've got to send a complaint, and then I've got to get a response, and then I got to go to the judge, and then I got to come back and put together another motion, and it takes forever, and it's always argumentative. And President Trump is rather combative, so yeah, that happens. Back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. But that was not a negotiation. That was not typical legal wrangling, as is often the case when a president leaves office. Look at Obama, look at Clinton, look at Bush. Similar things happened. Suddenly, we got to escalate it. We got to raid Mar-a-Lago and take these documents. Yeah, you went and physically took the documents, so you got the bulk of the trove. What does that have to do with the legal status of any of this? Nothing. The FBI chose to come in and physically take documents. That has no bearing on whether or not President Trump was allowed to have those documents. Ms. Clinton, as Secretary of State, her records would not fall under the authority of the Presidential Records Act. Factually true, but utterly irrelevant. She is accused of taking documents that were marked classified and stored on an air-gapped network. So, take a step back. Let's talk nerd time. There is a whole separate internet for classified and secret and top secret information. It has a completely separate set of connections and rules for accessing it, terminals, etc., and it is air-gapped from the regular network. In other words, if I'm a hacker and I'm sitting in my home and I want to hack into a particular server, I need a network connection, a connection that goes from one computer to another computer to another computer that eventually gets to the computer that I want to try and break into. If that computer I want to try and break into is, think Mission Impossible, the first one, is physically separate from the network I'm on, I can't hack it. It's one of the best security measures that we have. I have to physically go to a terminal that is connected to that network in order to access that information. Unless I have a Secretary of State that goes and takes classified information off that air-gapped server and brings it over and puts it on her server that is not on that air-gapped classified network. It's on the regular public internet, which means that if I'm in Ukraine or Russia or Germany and I want to hack Ms. Clinton's server, then we are relying on the security admins that work for her personally to have set this up correctly, or else it's going to get cracked open and anyone with an internet connection can access these documents that should be on a classified network. No one is alleging that that did not happen. Clinton admits that's what happened. The FBI itself determined that it's pretty likely some foreign actors got access to that information. That should lead to charges. Let's even call it on the Espionage Act, because guess what? You took actions that allowed access by foreign actors to sensitive government information. That's what you did. However, the FBI said, you know what? We're going to say that because she didn't mean it, we're not going to charge her. Somehow this setup that she had that was outside the regular process was accidental. It was not intentional. There was no element of motive to say that this person, Ms. Clinton, broke the law on purpose or was trying to be, evil or disruptive. And therefore, since we can't prove motive, we're just not going to charge her. That's basically how that wrapped up. Now, yes, politically damaging probe, sure. You know what was politically damaging about it? Anthony Weiner had a laptop that he was using to send sexually explicit messages to and from minor girls. Sorry, this is what actually happened. No one even on the left is alleging these things didn't happen. Also on that laptop, which was seized and examined as part of a probe on Anthony Weiner, was a bunch of classified documents related to Hillary Clinton's setup, because Anthony Weiner's wife was Miss Clinton's primary aide. 1 degree of separation from Clinton. You have a morally corrupt person doing compromising things on a laptop that also has this kind of information that should be locked down on the air-gapped network. That laptop and that information was discovered like 4 days before the 2016 election. So yeah, politically damaging probe. But Clinton only has herself to blame. She's the one that allowed this setup to happen. This is her organization. This is how she would have governed had she been made president. Past behavior is the best indicator for future behavior. Here's again where we get back to that let's switch context and be tricky. Stephanopoulos, I've heard your attack on Biden, your attack on Hillary. What I have not heard from you is a defense of Trump's behavior. Lindsay Graham, I'm not justifying his behavior. Stephanopoulos, but you're endorsing him for president. Graham, yeah, they're trying to delegitimize him. Stephanopoulos is saying, why aren't you defending President Trump on a legal basis? Lindsay Graham says, I'm not trying to create a legal defense for him here. I'm pointing out the hypocrisy of the justice system and the reason why Republican voters don't take this kind of investigation seriously, because it appears such investigations only happen if it is politically useful. And Stephanopoulos says, he's legally in trouble. And so Graham says, yeah, I know, but you're endorsing him for president. That's a political decision. A lot of people make the super divisive allegation that the Democrats stole the 2020 election. And other people say, well, that means that Trump should get it back or whatever. Well, sorry, here's the deal. They probably stole the election. Politicians put their thumb on the scale of elections. Of course they do. It's how they access money and power. And if they can put their thumb on the scale and say, hey, maybe I can increase my odds of winning. If they can do that, then they will, if they think they can get away with it. You'll notice I'm not speaking partisan here. This is something politicians do. This is why gerrymandering exists. This is why tweaking legislation to create advantages for yourself or for your side exists. This is life. This is human beings being biased. Where perhaps I draw a small distinction from some of my colleagues on the right is to say, yeah, they successfully stole the election. And that means President Biden is president. He is the legitimate president of the United States of America, to our everlasting shame. What are you going to do about it? If you don't take seriously the corruption of our electoral process that caused this to happen, the corruption of our intelligence agencies that enabled it to happen, and continue to enable tremendous misbehavior, if you don't take those two issues seriously, it's only a matter of time before we collapse. The thing is, here's an analogy for you, and this is what I'll close on, because I'm already at 30 minutes. Good night. Here's the analogy, and this is what I'll close on. Imagine that you are standing at a table in a warehouse, and the table has 30 enormous bombs. And on each bomb is a kitchen egg timer. The old twist style ones. You can twist it up to, let's say, 5 minutes. But once you've twisted it up, if you let it go down and ding, the bomb's going to go off. Each one of these bombs is an issue that could potentially be fatal to the American Republic, to our experiment. For quite some time, so let's take one as an example, is the debt. We have a tremendous amount of debt. That's a big problem. When we started taking on oceans of debt, when we went off the gold standard, that enabled a tremendous expansion, a tremendous economic boom. Because it's easier to boom when you've got cheap money, and you can't have cheap money if you're tied to an outside standard, like gold or silver, both of which have been tried as backing for US currency. We go off the gold standard. We start to take on debt. And someone took the bomb labeled debt, and that turns it on. And ever since then, politicians have been fiddling with that egg timer. Crank, crank. Oh, it's getting close. Crank. Oh, let's find another way. Crank. And they keep delaying the explosion. If you've only got the one thing to watch, you can manage that. But now let's go ahead and put in a permanent military state, a permanent standing military. That can be a wonderful thing. But if you take a standing army and you corrupt it, well, that could be a republic ending event. Just ask the Romans. So now we have to manage a standing army and everything that goes with it. Turn. Well, we got to manage the debt too. So we got to split our attention between two. I can do two. I've got two hands. Perfect. Now let's add the corruption of our justice system. That we have preferential treatment based on race, class, based on political identification, based these days on sexual behavior, sexual preference, an expression of those sexual ideas, which is bonkers, but sure. But if you live in a country where the justice system is corrupt, where it is multi-tiered, you're going to rip yourself apart if you let that go too far. The idea that everyone is equal under the law is one of the things that glues us together. A society without justice will become no society at all. Because eventually you'll get someone who will say, I'm going to push it as far as I can. And they are going to push it hard enough that it's going to break the justice system. Because the justice system only stands if it is equal justice under the law. Anything else, and it will fall eventually. Well, now I got 3 of these timers to manage. Well, let's add in a corrupted media. Let's add in a corrupted educational system. Let's add in corrupt business practices. Let's add in foreign tampering. Let's add in direct electoral tampering by political actors. Now we've got 6 or 7 of these things, any one of which, if it goes too far, could blow and take the whole thing down with it. But now we've got to manage this and twist this and watch. Oh, this one's almost done. Run over there and turn this timer up a bit. It's hard to escape the conclusion. It doesn't buy us much to sit here and fiddle with the timers. We need to start disarming some of the bombs. We need to get our monetary policy back to sanity. We need to fix the integrity of our electoral system so that everyone's vote who should count counts, and not a single vote that's illegitimate does not count. It's possible. It's actually pretty straightforward to do, but you have to have the political will to do it. Most politicians do not. It's far too convenient for them to keep their power. We have to be very, very careful with how we conduct ourselves in regards to the extremely powerful intelligence apparatus that we've built and the extremely powerful military that we've built. And the fact that just in the last 10 or 20 years, although the process has been going on quite some time, we've seen tremendous degradation in the personal integrity of those who hold that power. We are now in a position where it is a near certainty that there are tremendously evil, corrupt actors in both the military and the intelligence apparatus that are fueling activities like child trafficking, child sex trafficking, drug trafficking, electoral tampering, etc. That's the reality we are right now. And I'm not that interested in spending my life chasing around, trying to fiddle with the timers, trying to keep all these simultaneous brewing crises from blowing up. I think it's time we start disarming some of these bombs. Hopefully, I'm not alone. That's my Reddit rant for today. Good luck out there.